All right, so we were able to derive this as the intertemporal budget constraint. So the present value of the individual's lifetime consumption should be exactly the same as the present value of the individual's lifetime income. So as the individual is making an intertemporal choice, he doesn't only consider current income and current consumption, but he also considers future income and then future consumption level. So based on the budget constraint, this is the implication that we had. Now, the individual is allowed to borrow or save in any of the two periods. We assume two periods, okay? So this person is allowed to borrow or save in any of these two periods with the level of interest rate. So from the budget constraints, the individual's present discounted value of lifetime consumption must be exactly the same as the present discounted value of lifetime income. So you are allowed to borrow in any of the periods, but you are not allowed to consume more than you earn. And also, you are not allowed to consume less than you earn. You need to make sure that over your entire life, you are consuming exactly what you earn. Okay. Now, if we assume that the person is going to live for t number of years before the person dies, then whatever consumption and savings choices that he is trying to make them in order to maximize his satisfaction or his utility over this entire life. Okay, over this entire life. So we'll try to see how this individual can maximize this utility, okay, subjected to the budget constraints that we just looked at, okay. So before you can maximize your utility, the intertemporal budget constraint must hold, okay, before you can maximize this utility, because you are maximizing it, the utility function subjected to the budget constraint. And the budget constraint is telling us that your present value of your consumption cannot exceed the present value of your income. All right, so as I was saying, this individual wants to maximize his utility, but whatever utility you want to maximize is subjected to the intertemporal budget constraint, and it's telling us that you cannot consume more than you earn over your lifetime. So you maximize your utility, bearing in mind that you can only consume what you earn. So if we assume that this individual is living for T number of years, then it means that when you discount all the income levels that he will earn over all these years, okay, from the time that he starts consuming to the time that he dies, the summation of the discounted values are supposed to be exactly the same as the summation of the discounted values of consumption over the person's entire lifetime. Okay, so you can't earn more than you consume, and then you can't also earn less than you you can't consume less than what you earn. Okay, so we'll try and get the utility function graphically. We'll use the indifference curve with the help of the intertemporal budget constraint. They will be able to derive the optimal bundles of the current consumption and then the future consumption that will be able to maximize this individual's utility. Okay. Now, from the intertemporal budget choice, we've seen that the individual is allowed to borrow or to lend in any of the periods. You borrow when in the current period you are consuming more than you are earning, and then you lend when you consume more than what you earn. Okay, so you are allowed. We have a free credit system where you can always borrow or lend. This is the reason why the intertemporal budget constraints holds. But we have to bear in mind that there's a limit to the consumption level. You can't consume more than what you earn over your entire life. So this is the intertemporal budget constraint that we know. So we'll have to graph this and look at how the budget line is, and then we add the indifference curves to get the optimum bundles. So what you see here is the intertemporal budget line. Okay, this is the intertemporal budget line. The horizontal line measures the consumption in the first period, and then the vertical line measures the consumption in the second period. Now, if you look at the middle of the budget line, we have Y2. This is the income earned in the second period. And then Y1 is the income earned in the first period. So if the consumer chooses this point, okay, if he chooses this point, it means that consumption in each period will be exactly equal to the income in that period. If you are consuming at this point, you see that this is a budget line. So any point on this budget line is affordable to this in the individual. So if you choose a bundle at this point, it means that in the second period, you consume Y2, and Y2 is the income in period 2. And then you consume Y1 in the current period, which is the income earned in that period. So if you choose a bundle right in the middle of the budget constraint, you are consuming all that you earn in either of the two periods, okay? So this will mean that C1 will be exactly equal to Y1, and then C2 be exactly equal to Y2. What this means is there's no borrowing, there's no savings, okay? But looking at the budget constraints, where which bundle would this individual choose when he's a saver? And then which range of bundles can he choose when he's a borrower? Assuming he chooses this bundle, okay, he chooses something around this point, okay? If he chooses something here, it means this is going to be the level of second period consumption. This is going to be the level of first period consumption. So what is happening here? It means that the person is consuming less than he's earning in the first period. If you choose a bundle here, okay, if you choose a bundle here, you are consuming less than you earn in the first period, which means that when you go to the second period, you have to consume more than you earn there. So when you choose a bundle within this range, from this point to this point, it means that the person is a saver. Okay, the person is a saver because you are consuming less than what you earn in the first period, and then you are consuming more than what you earn in the second period. But if you choose a point here, then if you look at this, a consumption level here for the first period means you are consuming more than you earn. It means you're a borrower. And that will mean that you have to consume less than what you earn in the second period, but you have to pay for the borrowing that you did in the first period. Okay. So this is the intertemporal budget constraints that we know, and how we know the person is saving, how we know the person is borrowing, and then the case where the individual is neither saving or running into debt. Okay, so any question? All right. The slope of the intertemporal budget constraint is the discounting rate. Okay, the discounting factor. So what this factor that we have here will measure the cost of current consumption in terms of future consumption. So the higher this value, the more costly is it to this individual to consume in the current period. In other words, this individual is allowed to save, okay? So the 1 cedi that you have today, if you save it, when you get to the second period, you earn some interest on it. And this interest payment depends on the interest rate, this R that we have here. So now, if interest rate is very high, then it means that if you are able to save 1 cedi today, you get a lot of money in the future, which means you'll be willing to postpone today's consumption to the future. So when interest rate increases, it makes current consumption more expensive. Okay, the opportunity cost of consuming in the current period will be more expensive. So we expect that when when interest rate increases, we expect the individual to consume more in the second period and consume less in the first period. On the other hand, when interest rate falls, it means the cost of consumption in the first period has reduced, so we can consume more in the first period and then consume less in the second period. Okay. In other words, borrowing has become cheaper. The interest rate has fallen. So then why don't I borrow more, consume more today? When I get to the future, then I'll use my money there to settle my debt. Okay. So the slope of the budget line is this. It's negative because of the downward sloping nature of the budget line. Okay. Then we'll measure the individual's utility with the indifference curves. We know what indifference curves are. So here, the indifference curve is showing us the combination of current consumption and future consumption that yields the same level of utility or satisfaction to this individual. So whether he chooses a point here, or a point there, he gets the same level of satisfaction. It's just like the indifference curve we know in micro. Okay, but then micro 2, we saw that higher indifference curves correspond to higher levels of utility. So this individual will prefer indifference curve 2 to indifference curve 1, okay, because the second one is higher than the first one. So this is the representation of the individual's utility or satisfaction. As we know from micro, the slope of the indifference curve is the marginal rate of substitution. That is the amount of second period consumption that this individual is willing to sacrifice just for 1 unit of first period consumption. Okay, it's just like the micro that we know. So the value here will measure the amount of C2 that the person is willing to sacrifice just to get an additional unit of first period consumption. So when do we have equilibrium? We have equilibrium when the slope of the budget line and the indifference curve are the same. Graphically, when the indifference curve is tangential to the budget line. Okay, when the indifference curve is tangential to the budget line, and we are able to get the optimal quantities of current consumption and then future consumption that will maximize the individual's lifetime utility. Okay, so if this is the case, then it means that the marginal rate of substitution, which is the slope of the indifference curve, must be exactly the same as the slope of the budget line. So when it happens like this, then this individual will be consuming C1 here, this consumption here, C1 star, and then C2 star. So by consuming those quantities, the person's lifetime utility is maximized. Okay, the person's lifetime utility is maximized. So that is how we derive the optimal combinations of current and then future consumption levels. Now we want to know, please, do you have any questions so far? Okay, so we want to look at the effect of a change in income on the optimal bundles. If there's a change in income in either periods, how will the individual respond to these changes? For micro, we saw that if there's an increase in income, the budget line shifts outwards. The intuition is the same here, okay? So if income should increase, by here, because current consumption doesn't only depend on current income, and then future consumption too doesn't only depend on future income, whether income increases in the first period or the second period will affect consumption in both periods. Okay, so when you are thinking of what to consume in period 1, you also consider the income in period 2. So assuming the two goods are normal goods, then if there's an increase in income in period 2, it will affect your consumption in period 1. Okay, so increase in income in period 2, assuming consumption in the first period is a normal good, then it will cause consumption in the first period to increase. If there's an increase in income in the first period, this person can save. So it's going to affect consumption in the future too. So it means that consumption in both periods depend on income in both periods. So it doesn't matter where the change in income is coming from, whether it's coming from the first period or it's coming from the second period. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so whenever there's a change in income, whether Y1 or Y2, will cause the budget line to rotate outwards. Okay, when it rotates outwards, this individual is able to move to a higher indifference scale. So this was the initial equilibrium point. Okay, let's show this. He was consuming this unit in the second period, and then consuming this in the first period. But because income has increased either from the first period or the second period, this is going to be the new levels of consumption. Okay, so it's causing the individual to increase his consumption in both periods. So we can do same for a reduction in income in any of the periods. That one will start from here. So if either Y1 or Y2 decreases, then we'll fall to a lower budget line, and hence a lower indifference scale. So the consumption levels will just fall. Okay. Please, is that okay?
Sir, please, I have a question.
Okay.
Please, how does the change in income in the second period affect consumption in the first period? Because
Okay.
consumption in the first period has already occurred. Or
right. Then I think you don't understand the intertemporal budget constraint. So let me talk about that one again. The intertemporal budget constraint is telling us that consumption doesn't only depend on current income, but the lifetime income of the consumer. That is why we discount the future income level and bring it to the present. So intuitively, it's like the person is expecting a certain level of income in the future. So I can borrow today against my expected income in the future. But per the budget constraint that we have now, we've seen that your lifetime consumption, okay, which is C1 over the discounting factor, should be equal to your income in the present period and the discounted value of your future income. Okay, this is Y0, this is Y1 over the discounting factor. So what we are trying to say is your consumption decisions, whether in the first or the second period, will depend on the value of your lifetime income. And your lifetime income is a summation of the income that you earn in the first period and then in the second period. You see, we are holding an assumption that this individual can borrow and can lend. Okay. So now, if we can consume more than what we earn in our current period, then it means that the income in the future is going to be higher than what we consume there. So we'll use that excess income to pay for the debts that we incurred after we have borrowed some amount of money. So we are holding an assumption that if you are making your consumption decision today, you need to consider the income that you are expecting in the future. You've not realized that income yet, okay? But you are expecting an amount of income in the future. And as a result, you are able to consume today against that expected income. So we are not only considering the consumption in that period, we are considering your lifetime consumption and comparing it to your lifetime income. Under King's consumption function, your current consumption was only dependent on your current income, and that was all. So if you are living for 2 periods, what you consume today would depend on what you have today. When you enter the second period, what you consume there will be dependent on what you have there. But this theory, you are making an intertemporal choice. Intertemporal choice means you are deciding between two periods or more. Okay, here we are assuming two periods. So if you are deciding between two periods, then it means that whatever happens in one period should affect your decisions in the other period. That's why we are saying current consumption will also, future income will also affect today's consumption. And then today's income too can affect tomorrow's consumption, because we can save today. If we are able to save more today, when we get to the future, we can consume more there. And if we know we get an amount of money in the future, then we can borrow today and consume more, so that when we get to that future, we use that income to pay. So if you expect that you get a lot of money in the future, you can spend now. Let's bring it to the real world. Just assuming someone promises to give you, say, 1,000 cedis. Don't you think it's possible you can go to your friend and get some money, hoping to get that money and pay the person back? Or you can go and buy something on credit and hope that when you get that money, then you use it to pay. So what is happening is that what you are consuming now is dependent on that expected future income. Is that okay?
Yes, please, it's okay. Thank you.
All right. Please, any other question? Okay, so that is the effect of income. We also have to look at the effect of changes in the interest rate. Okay, since the interest rate is part of the slope, when there's a change in interest rate, it causes a rotation. Okay, initially I'll talk about the intuition, but let's look at the diagram. Initially, this was the equilibrium point. So the person was consuming this unit of C1 and this unit of C2. When there's an increase in interest rate, the budget line will rotate outwards like this, which means now you consume more in the second period and consume less in the current period. Why is it so? We are saying that the interest rate is measuring the cost of consumption in the first period. If interest rate is high, it means that if you save today, you get a lot of interest on it so that you can consume more in the future. So to the individual, whenever there's an increase in interest rate, he will postpone current consumption to the future. So postponing current consumption to the future means that you are consuming less in the current period so that you can consume more in the first period. But this, whether there's going to be an increase in the first period or the second period, depends on the kind of individual we are talking about, whether the person is a saver or the person is a borrower. Okay, because we are allowing that the individual can either borrow or the person can save. So what happens if the individual is a saver? We will have to decompose the total effect into income and substitution effect. Some call the substitution effect the price effect. Okay, the price effect. Now let's look at the income effect first. Now there's an increase in interest rate. Okay, so assuming you were a saver, if you were a saver, you are saving some amount of money, and there's an increase in the interest rate. It means that it's going to cause an increase in your income because you earn some interest on the savings that you are doing. And we just saw that whenever there's an increase in income, it doesn't matter the period that the increase occurs. It will affect consumption in both periods. So if you are saving and there's an increase in the interest rates, there'll be an increase in your interest payments, which means there'll be an increase in your income. That will cause consumption to increase in both periods. Are we together? Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Please, do we understand what I'm talking about here?
No.
Okay. what I'm saying is that we want to look at the effect of changes in interest rates on consumption levels in both the current and then the future period. Okay. Now, the analysis is done based on the type of individual in question. Is the person a saver or the person is a borrower? Why do we save? We save because we want to get interest on our savings. Okay, we want to get interest on our savings. So let me use this example. Assuming that initially you were saving 1 cedi, okay, and the interest rate was 20%. So if you save one cedi, after the period, you will get 1 cedi 20 pesos, right? 1 cedi 20 pesos because of the interest of 20%. 20% of 1 cedi is 20 pesos. So you get what? 1 cedi 20 pesos, which means your income has increased by 20 pesos. Now, what if the interest rate increases to 50%? If it goes to 50%, then now you get 1 cedi 50 pesos. You see that there's an increase in your income by 50 pesos. And now we've seen that whenever there's an increase in income, it doesn't matter the period that the increase occurred. It will affect both consumptions, okay, in both periods, okay. So now, because there's an increase in interest rates, we've gotten an increase in interest payments, which will increase our income. This is the case where the person is a saver. So because he's a saver, he's saving 1 cedi, income is increasing by 50 pesos. We are able to say consume more in both periods. We are able to consume more in both periods because our income has increased after the increase in the interest rate. Are we together?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Please, do we? Okay, let's look at the case of a borrower. Okay. Now, if you are also consuming more than you earn, okay, it means that you have to borrow. Let's say you borrow 1 cedi. Okay. When you borrow 1 cedi, you are paying an interest of 20%, which means that when you get to the next period, you have to pay back 1 cedi 20 pesos. So your income is being reduced by 20 pesos, okay, because you pay this as interest payment to another person. Now, assuming interest rate increases to 50%, you no more pay 20 pesos, but you pay 50 pesos. Paying 50 pesos means that you are losing 50 pesos from your lifetime income. So if there's a reduction in your lifetime income, then there's supposed to be a reduction in consumption in both periods. So if you are a borrower, whenever there's an increase in interest rates, it will cause a reduction in your lifetime income. So consumption in both periods will fall. That is the income effect. We are assuming that consumption in both periods are normal goods. Okay. So if you're a borrower, when interest rate increases, you have to pay a higher interest payment, which will be deducted from your lifetime income. So your income falls. When your income falls, it will affect consumption in both periods. So you have to consume less in both periods. Is that okay? But if you're a saver, you'll be receiving interest payment, and that will add up to your lifetime income. That is why you have to consume more in both periods. That's when you are a saver. Are we together?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. I hope it's better now.
Yes, please.
Okay, so that is the income effect. Let's take to the saver. Okay, so if you are a saver, the income effect will cause you to increase consumption in both periods. Now let's look at the substitution effect. In some books, you see price effect. It's the same thing. I said that the interest rate is the cost of consumption in the first period. Okay, so if there's an increase in interest rate, then the opportunity cost of consuming in the current period will increase. Okay, so you rather postpone current consumption to the future. Don't consume today. There's an increase in interest rate. Save so that you get a higher interest payment. So by postponing current consumption, you consume less in the first period and consume more in the second period because of the increase in interest rate. You want to take an advantage of the increase in interest rates to earn a higher interest payment. So consume less in the first period and consume more in the second period. So as for the substitution effect, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the person is a saver or a borrower. If interest rate increases, the opportunity cost of current consumption has increased. So consume less now and consume more in the future. I hope we understand that.
Please, can you go over again?
Right. What I'm saying is that the interest rate measures the opportunity cost of current consumption. What it means is that if there's an increase in interest rates, it is in the best interest of this individual to save so that you can earn a higher interest payment. So if this is the case, whilst you are saving, it means you are consuming less. So if you are saving in the current period because of the increase in interest rate, it means that you are consuming less in the first period. And we've seen from the intertemporal budget constraint that if you consume less now, you consume more in the future. If you because you have to, your present value of your lifetime consumption should be exactly the same as income. So if you are consuming less today, it means that you are sending your savings into the future to go and consume them. So whenever interest rate increases, you have to consume less in the current period so that you save more to take advantage of the increase in interest rates so that you can consume more in the future. So the substitution effect of an increase, the substitution effect of an increase in interest rates will cause the individual to consume less in the current period and consume more in the future period. And consume more in the future period. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
So now, what is the combined effect on current consumption and future consumption? We saw that the income effect will cause an increase in both C1 and then C2. Okay, the income effect is causing both C1 and C2 to increase. But the substitution effect is causing C1 to fall, okay? But it is still causing C2 to increase. So for the combined effect, we are certain that whenever there's an increase in interest rates, consumption in the second period will increase. But for C1, we are not so sure. It will depend on the magnitudes of the income effect and the substitution effect. If the income effect is more than the substitution effect, then we'll consume more in the current period as well. But if the substitution effect is more than the income effect, they will consume less in the current period. Okay, the meeting will go off soon, so we just have to reconnect it. Okay, so if you are a saver, then we expect an increase in future consumption if there's an increase in interest rate. But the effect on current consumption is ambiguous.